Welcome to Push Go, a podcast presented by Plum, where we highlight the defining moments that impact how we live and work. Today, I'm joined by Omid Moghadam. He's the CEO of Omid Labs. He's an inventor, an entrepreneur, an investor, an educator who has founded or co-founded 12 companies. Omid has inventions in the medical field, cryptography, microprocessor design, diagnostics, photography, science, and communication. And today, you'll hear how he is working to bring cancer screening to the masses. Omid, welcome to the Push Go podcast.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for the invite. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. I think you're the very first true inventor, entrepreneur type person we've ever had on the podcast. And I'd love to go back to the early part of your career when you were working in corporate America. Were you always kind of the closet inventor, entrepreneur working in the corporate world, or did that happen a little bit later? So kind of take us back early on in your corporate world as an engineer.
Okay, so I was trained as an engineer and computer scientist, and out of graduate school, I ended up at Eastman Kodak. I was living in New York at the time. And interestingly, I realized that I'm a lousy engineer once I started working, because engineers, in large teams are told to design something. Mm-hmm. And I was always that one that would say, we can do this better. We should do it the other way around.
Okay.
And it turned out I'm a much better inventor than actually an engineer. And so I started inventing things. And I was given a chance to actually do new things at Kodak. Kodak was a very interesting company at the time. Probably the closest thing to Kodak of the time, which is in the 90s, is probably Google today. Mm-hmm. So you have one company with a product that makes a lot of money. At the time, it was film and paper. But they invested in other things. So we were allowed to do a lot of different things there. And I was a digital imaging person, digital photography person. And I was a chance to do new things for Kodak. And I did a lot of inventions. I eventually became a Kodak Distinguished Inventor.
Oh, wow.
Got the plaque and,
You got the plaque that's there. So that's with Kodak. And that was 8-10 years or so with Kodak?
I was there 7 years.
7 years. Okay, 7 years. And from there, was that your foray into Intel?
No, I ended up being a management consultant in between.
Okay.
Moved from New York to DC. And I became a partner in a company called American Management System. Goes by acronym AMS. Now it's AMS CGI. And again, there had a chance to do new things. Mm-hmm. Again, at Kodak, I was moving around and doing new things, always trying to create some sort of a radical innovation for myself. Mm-hmm. And I did the same thing as a management consultant. We were mostly consulting to the government and healthcare and other fields, but it was always in something new.
So new was kind of that mantra for you, and continue to engage. So from there was the Intel, because I know we had some fun stories about your Intel days, back in the day.
Right.
Early days. But when you made that move, did it still allow you to be in an area that was creative and new and different? So
I was brought in to do that.
Just that, okay.
And interestingly, I had no intention of moving away from DC. And I actually was moving to a new consulting firm. I was moving to McKinsey when I got the call from Intel. And I told my wife at the time that I'm just going to go and collect some information. I'm just going to go for this interview. And I went for an interview and I came back, we're moving.
So what was the tipping point? What said this is the right place for me?
So what Intel was going through at the time was an inflection point for Intel, because Intel had gone through this massive, they won the wars. They won the CISC versus RISC wars, somewhat inside baseball, but it was the two different chip designs. And Intel had won that, and they had gone through this 3 cycles of product, the so-called 886 products. And when the 386 chip came out, people were lining up outside stores at midnight, sort of like when they did for the new iPhones.
Yeah.
486 came out, same thing. Pentium came out, they lined up. Pentium 4 came out, nobody lined up. And they realized that something has happened. And what had happened was that the hardware ecosystem that Intel was driving hard was improving, but the cost of developing software was not. So there wasn't enough software out there for this new powerful chip to run. So people weren't buying the new computers because they didn't need it.
Yeah.
And that was the job I was hired in to do, to create that ecosystem, to bring down the cost of developing software. And I did it through many different methods, because what we needed more of was software that needed high power computing. So all the things that we take for granted today, video processing, image processing, photography, editing of video, editing of images, voice recognition, pattern recognition, face recognition.
So in those days, you would literally process, go to sleep, get up the next morning, and you hope the video and things have been processed. And you had not only the chip, but you needed the software to catch up.
Exactly.
To make it quicker. Okay.
So all the fundamental technologies in developing that. And cost of developing software was huge. I mean, if you wanted to bring a new, say, image processing software to market, you probably needed at least somewhere between 50 to 100 engineers. You needed your own servers. You probably had to work on your own compilers.
Even think about your own servers. That's right.
So
wasn't
many
like you threw
different,
things in the cloud, right?
many different parts of the stack you had to develop yourself. So I had various teams around the world. We were just going around the world hiring the best people we could. So in Russia, we hired a whole bunch of mathematicians to work on the video and photography portions of it. Face recognition we had done in California, some in Europe, some in Asia, both in Shanghai and Beijing. So we were developing fundamental software libraries that we could open source
at Intel.
At Intel,
which was no one would be thinking that today.
No. And so out of 100,000 employees of Intel, most people don't know this, but a third of them are software engineers, because you have to develop a lot of software to make that piece of metal run. And so the strategic programs, which I was running, was doing just that. And we released all of these libraries. Like one of the most famous ones, computer vision, which is used everywhere now, essentially probably is used in a lot of different machine learning and computer vision applications out there. It went all the way to the space station for docking.
Wow.
So, and it was used in the autonomous vehicle race across the Mojave Desert. These are just the sort of like the headliner stuff, but it's used in a lot of everyday type of software. What it did was it fundamentally brought the cost of software development down. So all of those applications were developed at a third, fourth of the cost that they were before. So that opened up the door for Intel to sell more high-powered chips.
Okay, so you're running that having that role at Intel, living the dream. You've got amazing resources at your fingertips, right? Because everyone's funding this. The funding is coming in. So why leave Intel? You've got a pocketbook. You've got a company. You've got the machine. They are the chip. Why leave? Why change?
Oh, I didn't leave Intel. What Intel at that point decided that they want to get into healthcare. And they started scouring the company for anyone who has any sort of healthcare background. So one of the things I did at Kodak was in medical imaging. So that was my graduate school work has always been in medical imaging.
Okay.
In MRI, PET, tomographic reconstruction, that type of work. The first product at Kodak was an all-digital angiography system. It was an FDA-cleared device and all that. So I had gone through all that process of development and bringing that thing to market. So I was probably one of the handful of people who had any healthcare experience.
So when they looked for that, you just kind of raised your hand and said, they're like, you're kidding. Like, oh no, I've done
this before.
I've done this before. So you became one of a few.
I was one of the first 5 executives hired.
Did they treat that as a separate division, or did that start to feel like a separate company? Did they kind of spin that out?
No. It became a vertical.
Okay.
Became a vertical, Intel Digital Health. And I actually ended up spinning a company out of Intel called Dacia. And Dacia is sort of weirdly introduced me to Northwest Arkansas.
Okay.
Because Intel was the first investor, Walmart was the second investor, and eventually became its largest customer. So software company, healthcare IT, based in Boston. And it was a concept that we had developed, which was a personally controlled health record. And the idea here is that you as the individual customer, you actually own all of your own medical data. Mm-hmm. So the system that we were built could talk to the doctor's office, to the insurance company, to the dentist's office, to your optometrist, and all that information is owned by you and comes to your account. So that's essentially was Dacia. And that, sounds like a simple thing, but in healthcare,
it's almost like
nothing
it's
simple.
like a blockchain type of thing where you want to be so precise, though, that only I can uniquely have access to that.
You have uniquely access to, you own it all your life. So it starts with you at the beginning and moves with you from place to place. Even today, with all the money that we've spent in healthcare, digitizing everything, your data is still in silos.
Yeah.
It doesn't move from place to place.
Not
it's
even
very
close.
difficult.
Yeah.
And some places, they still hand you that clipboard every time you go visit them.
What's funny is that I have a spreadsheet, and I've got all my blood work up and everything I've done on the spreadsheet. And so before I go in to see my doctor, I print out my spreadsheet, and I've got almost 15 years of data.
Right.
And they look at me like, how do you? I said, well, you can't do this. I mean, I would walk in with like 3 folders of paper.
Yeah.
So I've created my own Excel version of all this data, and then I bring in some PDFs and give it to them. They're just shocked. I said, well, no one's created this.
Dacia could do that by 2006. We could do that.
Wow.
So we started working through large employers because we felt that if you want to change anything in healthcare, it has to come from people who have a financial interest in changing it. And employers are number one because they spend more than 50% of U.S. healthcare spend comes from large employers. So
then there's politics involved, and there's other things involved. So what stopped that from being an everyday occurrence today? What stopped it?
Well, so there were 2 camps. One camp is the sort of like the big iron of healthcare data, which is the likes of GE and Cerner up in KC and Epic. These are the big EMR vendors that deal with big hospitals and doctors' offices and big systems. And their version of healthcare IT is that all your data sits in these big vendors' systems. But they don't talk to one another because the business models of systems do not want data transportability. Part of it is their business model because your data within a system makes you sticky to that system. You don't leave. And the other part of it is that every time data moves from one system to another, somebody has to take responsibility for it. What if your lab data was incorrectly tabulated and sent to another system?
Who's liable?
They treat you. Who's liable? So that handshake between the different big iron systems is always legally questionable. We solved it very elegantly at 1/10 of a cost because everyone can talk to you. You own the data, and you give permission for it to change hands. And that was Dacia's business model. It was a very elegant IT solution. It wasn't just a usability issue. It was a radical innovation around all of these problems that the system had created for itself.
So that's a great cadence. So now we're in healthcare. You're still within this world. You've got a taste of this. You're going to invent some things. Now, you had a couple of other career moves, but I want to fast forward into this thing called an incubator. You ended up in an incubator here in Northwest Arkansas.
I did.
That got you kind of involved in something that eventually led to the company we're going to talk about in a second. So how did you end up with the incubator? How did you end up engaging there?
So I ran Dacia from 2005 to 2008. I took a leave of absence from Intel. So I was there for 3 years. And I felt that portion of my work was done. I wanted to liberate healthcare data, and I felt that it has gotten to a point that it's going to be liberated. The next thing that was coming out at that time was next-gen sequencing. That was, the Human Genome Project they had published the first genome. All these new machines were delivered.
Movies about it. There's all kinds of things, right?
08, yeah. So it's 08. We're at the beginning of the next-gen sequencing dawn. And the biggest problem at that point was that there are all these machines, $1 million machines that people are buying. And every night these things are dropping a terabyte of data. And there is no infrastructure to do anything with that data. There's no code. There's no servers. So I saw an opportunity for Intel here to be able to own that field. And at the time, the CEO of Intel, Paul Otellini, was saying that, we need to be in more than chips and hardware. We need to have some services.
So he realized it's coming.
Yeah, that's the thing that they wanted. And me and a couple of other partners in crime that we usually did things together at Intel, we put this plan together of creating a subsidiary of Intel called Intel Genomics, and go after that market. A business model that was very much like a cable set-top box.
Okay.
So we made this mini supercomputer that would sit next to a gene sequencer, and it would analyze. It would only have software in it that was designed to work with gene data, and it would analyze that data, do all the reads, and that box would always have updated data. So we had a team of mathematicians, again, in Intel Russia, sitting and reading the papers. Because at the time, all these algorithms were only published in papers. There was no code for it.
That's crazy. That's crazy, yeah.
So that code, every night, would get updated. So the latest algorithms were always in that box. And that was the model. The box was free. Service was $10,000 a month.
Okay.
And it was a huge success in terms of financially. It was a huge success because if you were a major research laboratory, a university, and you had 2 or 3 sequencers, you needed somewhere around $10 to $15 million of upgrades to your IT infrastructure to be able to handle the data that comes out of those.
That's significant.
Plus, you needed a couple of PhD computer scientists to read those papers and write algorithms for them. So you had to do your code in-house. We went around all of that. So that was a good proof of concept that we did. We had a few units installed, and we started negotiating with Illumina, which is the largest manufacturers of next-gen sequencing machines. And they saw that this lack of infrastructure is hindering them from selling more sequencers. So the deal was they would buy the service from us, give it to their customers for a year for free, and
get them hooked. And
then we will sign them up after a year.
Right.
And so we thought that it's time for some Series A money from our, from Intel.
Which makes sense,
yep.
Right?
Yeah, because we had gone through the original money that we had. We had a great team put together. Our mathematicians in Russia were doing the codes. Our units in the field were working fine. And so we go back to Intel, and they're like, no, we've been receiving some complaints about you guys. Turned out that Intel's biggest customers, people who buy chips to make servers, were counting on those $10 to $15 million worth of upgrades to everyone who was doing
so
genomics
that's upsetting
research.
To us. Therefore, you would do us a favor if you would maybe slow down or eliminate funding for a thing that's going to put us out of business.
Right. So that's what happened.
Oh,
they closed us down. That's
the story of tech. I mean, it's the story of healthcare. I mean,
it is. Yeah.
Person A has a money stream. I'm concerned that you're going to eliminate X, and I'm going to come in and use my lobbyist or engagement to make that happen. So that's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking. Yeah. Okay. So
interestingly, years after I left Intel, the presentations that I had made at that point would make it back to me with someone else's name on it as a new business. It's like, what do you think of this? And like, it was a great idea 5 years ago when I presented it. By the way, those are my slides.
Oh, that's so good.
So it's life in a large company.
It is. It's life in a large company. But now you're part of this incubator, and you've got this same cohort of guys around you. And you're trying to look for the next big thing.
No, we're talking 3 years in the.
Okay.
So when they shut down Intel Genomics, I got an appointment at Harvard Med School.
Okay.
Because now I'm thinking, you liberated the health data. Next-gen sequencing would give you the genomic signature of a human. The third leg of the stool is environmental data. So there's a data fusion project, and that's the work that I did there, was essentially combining 3 sets of data, trying to see can we find patterns in diseases. And
so they funded a chair or funded the research there?
Yeah, I was like
an adjunct.
I was an adjunct.
Okay,
so
adjunct, but they funded the research.
Yeah, so I was doing that work there, and I was doing entrepreneurial things on the side too. I joined an oil and gas exploration company in Canada.
Why not? Yeah,
looking for gold up in. So it was, I did a lot of different things for a few years until I came to Northwest Arkansas and joined an incubator in Fayetteville that looked for very early stage research, results of early stage research universities to start new companies. And they wanted to get into life sciences and create a vertical in med devices and life sciences. And when I was with Dacia in Boston, I got to know this company called Allied Minds, which does that. And Allied Minds was doing very well at the time. So I thought, well, these guys are like Allied Minds. Let's take a look. And never been to. I've never lived in the middle of the country. I've lived on the coasts.
Yeah,
and it was interesting. I came and met some of the people here, met some very good entrepreneurial people, some of our mutual friends, and I thought I'll take a risk and see if we can do this in the middle of the country.
Okay.
My friends back on both coasts thought I was absolutely crazy.
You're out of your mind. Because they can't find Arkansas on the map. They definitely can't find Fayetteville, Arkansas on the map.
Right.
And why would you do this? And then you're saying you don't understand. I see something. Again, you're a pattern guy. You see something that they didn't see.
That I'm a bit of a contrarian. So when they tell me you can't be done, and I'm thinking I'm going to do it twice now that you told me. So
that's good.
That's been partly driving force of my career.
Oh, that's fun.
And interestingly, most of those people who said it can't be done, once it's done, they show up again to tell you, so not that you did it, it has to be done from this point on this way. So
okay, yeah.
You've worked in Fortune 50, you know
totally
the pattern.
I have, yes. I understand exactly where you're going. Wow, so you're in the incubator. You're looking for the next, really the next opportunity that you're going to spend time on.
Right.
And let's kind of fast forward to this concept working with tears, because this is going to be the next little bit we're going to talk through, is that you found a bit of research that someone in Little Rock had been doing.
Right.
And so kind of speak to that a little bit, because that's going to kind of get us into what you're working on today.
Yes. So I think we started about half a dozen companies when I was with the incubator in Fayetteville. And in all different things. So it was medical imaging. There was some cardiac imaging in there. There was some hardware for spinal cord surgery. So there was a lot of different things across the med device spectrum. But the one that captured my imagination was this concept that a prominent breast surgeon, name of Suzanne Klimberg, who was at the time she was the head of breast and ovarian cancer program at UAMS.
Okay.
She in 2006 she had this idea that perhaps there could be breast cancer markers in tears, and she was she did that after she attended a conference, and another prominent breast surgeon named Suzanne Love, another Suzanne, at UCLA, she had found breast cancer markers in milk of lactating women who happened to have breast cancer. And Suzanne thought that, well, if you can see it in milk, can you see it in tears? So she got a grant and she did some work, and she saw something there. She saw some sort of a pattern there. But the work was never finished to the point that you can actually see what markers are there. And that was the work that we brought into the incubator. So we had a scientific team there, and we did some preliminary discovery work there for 2 years. And we we found a pattern. We found a pattern, and then in 2013, I left the incubator, and that company spun out of the incubator and became a full-time job. The company was called Ascendant Diagnostics. And for the next 6 years, essentially, we did clinical trials, validation, looked for those markers and found them.
And that's really one of the first times that I was aware of this. My wife's a breast cancer survivor. And when she was going through chemotherapy, or just prior to that, and going through with her doctor, she saw like a notice or something on a board somewhere that said, "Hey, would you like to participate in a study?"
Yes.
So I was like, sure. I was standing there with her. She's like, "Well, what do I have to do?" Well, it's simple. We do this. We're going to take your tear. And sure enough, she was part of the early on testing of that showed where she had the marker there, which was pretty cool for me to see that, come through. Now, by the grace of God,
we were very grateful to all the participants.
Oh, by the grace of God, she is 6 years cancer free, so it's fantastic. So that was my first kind of foray into seeing that kind of come around. But when you were going through the research for that, you said it's about 5-6 years of going to the clinical trials, or I guess it's the research of the tier. Well, when did you know? When did you saw the pattern, because you're a pattern guy, but when did you know it's like, this is going to work? I've seen enough of the pattern. I know now that it's time for me to go to the next step, which is trying to understand how could I commercialize, or how could I make this available to the mass population of women that need a better way to at least predict, or not predict, to let them know that they could have breast cancer.
Breast cancer is an interesting field. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of funny because it goes back to my first employer, Kodak. Kodak is really the company that made mammography, which is made it possible. Because let's take a step back in time. Mm-hmm. The first documented case of breast cancer is about 4,000 years ago, an Egyptian queen.
Okay.
So imagine 4,000 years ago to 1985. The way to find breast cancer was essentially by touching. Women will find a lump in their breast, and for about 4,000 years, that was the method.
That was it.
In 1985, Kodak invented a new silver halide crystal that was T-shaped, which meant when you coated a piece of X-ray film with it, the resolution was much higher. And that was the first time we could actually see calcifications in an image. Mm-hmm. And even though the sensitivity, the effectiveness of the mammogram is not 100%, you went from having 0
to something,
50 to 70%, depending on the physiology of the breast.
Okay.
So that established it. And then this sort of monopoly formed around it.
Okay.
So now we've had like 2 generations of breast radiologists that are trained to do nothing but imaging for breast screening.
And the hardware and the infrastructure and the business model around imaging is everywhere.
Yeah, it's everywhere. And it's reimbursed by insurance. It's every October, everyone's in pink. Mm-hmm. Get a mammogram, get a mammogram, get a mammogram. But the better way of doing it is that you need a biological test that just says something's going in your body. Mm-hmm. Then you go look and image it. Sort of, if you're old enough to remember the Cold War, mm-hmm. you can image as much as you want the East German forests. A lot of stuff are going to look like Russian tanks in there.
Right.
But eventually you have to send someone in to take a look and see what it is.
They got to confirm it.
Yeah. And that's where we are with mammography.
Wow.
Everything looks like cancer until you have to go in and look at it. And in some cases, nothing looks like cancer because half the women have dense breasts.
And you can't really see.
No, it's like finding a polar bear in a snowstorm.
That was my wife's issue, is that they told her is that she just luckily found, through touch, this is what's going on, that when she went in, he said, your tissue is so dense, we would have never seen this, even if we had gone through the process, because she was about a month out from having a mammogram. And he said, we would have missed this.
Exactly.
It would have been a year later, and she had a stage 2. It was aggressive growth. He said, if this had waited another year, totally different prognosis.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So early detection is the key with cancer. Mm-hmm. Early detection means 99% survival. And we see abnormalities at stage 0. So at the very beginning of it, we can detect things before you can even see it on an image. Mm. And So that was a driving force behind it. It's like, there's something there that's not good. We can radically change it, bring radical innovation into a field that is serving only really half the population, and even the half that they're serving are being served poorly.
Wow, so it's interesting. So when you look at solving a problem, you've got half the population that might even have access, and within that half that even has access, many of them, the technology is not going to work.
Yes.
And even then, you don't start doing that until age
40.
So you're able to say, hey, what if I could create something that could do 100%, well, not 100, but well, 90 plus whatever percent,
Right.
a massive percentage, and possibly even start younger. So you're solving a massive problem here.
Yeah. Well, current guidelines say 40 to 70 is when you were supposed to be screening annually for breast cancer. But there are plenty of women who get cancers between the ages of 30 and 40.
Right.
And those cancers are typically very aggressive in younger women. And there is no guidelines for screening them. Nobody covers it. There's no way for them to go and get screened. We can do that.
So you've got the technology where you're starting to see the patterns, you're seeing the numbers coming in, you're feeling good about that. And so at that point in time, you're ready to go to market. But I love the name of the company. And why don't you kind of walk us through how that's tied to tears and where you came up with the name of the company itself?
Right. So the company is called Namida. Namida in Japanese means tears. And there is a bridge today, still there, but it's been there forever. Namida Bashi is a bridge. And in the old days, it used to link the prison to the execution yards. And the bridge is where the families of the condemned were allowed to meet the person on their way to the execution yard for the last time. So it's a bridge of tears. And in our parlance, bridge of tears is cancer. It's really what rips you away from your loved ones. I lost my mom to cancer.
Oh, so sorry.
Thank you. So we named it Namida because we want to end that bridge of tears.
Fantastic. Yeah, so the bridge of tears, I love that. So now you have this technology. It's proven. Again, we're not going to get into the details of percentages, but it's proven. It's the right type of technology. Now it's ready to go to market. So everyone welcomed you with open arms, right? This is a great technology, so we should put this in every doctor's office and every location. It should be that simple. Not really.
Nothing is simple in
Nothing is simple in medical.
Nothing's simple in
healthcare.
U.S. healthcare system.
Yes.
In the U.S. healthcare system, other healthcare systems, things are a little bit easier.
Okay.
But not in the U.S. healthcare system. Incentives are different here than there are in other places. Not unless insurance companies reimburse it, nothing gets into the doctor's offices. And so we decided that we're going to go direct to consumer.
Okay. Wow.
Because
that's crazy.
all those years of clinical trials, when we went to clinics, women who had just had their mammogram done, everyone said, I wish this was available. I would have done this today.
Okay.
So, and COVID actually gave us an opening for that too, because what happened was during COVID, there was all of these small fledgling companies that were doing at-home testing. And then COVID allowed them to send COVID tests home, so you could collect your sample and then mail it in. Companies like Everlywell and all those. And so collecting tears at home is very easy. Schirmer strip takes 3 to 5 minutes. So we decided that we have something here. And we decided to actually make a version of our test direct to consumer on our own e-commerce platform and have it sent to people's homes.
So if you're let me get this right. So if you're a woman today between the ages of
30 to 80 plus.
If you're older than 30, older than 30 today, and it's especially if you have any even remote history in your background, but still any woman today that's 30, they can actually order a test, and that test via checking the tears in their eyes could tell them if they have the beginning stages of breast cancer, and they can do that today.
Well, we call it the breast abnormality.
Okay.
So we're following the like tests like Cologuard. So Cologuard doesn't tell you if you have colorectal cancer. Cologuard tells you whether you need to go get a colonoscopy or not.
Okay.
So our test, our direct-to-consumer test, puts you in 3 different categories. Low risk, that means that if you're going to get a mammogram, 12 to 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
Medium risk, and medium means 12 months. High risk means that 3 to 6 months where you should go get a mammogram. So essentially, the follow-up to our test is imaging, sort of like the Russian tanks in East German forests.
Right.
Because you still have to look and see what's there. And that's the logical steps that should be taken. There should be a biological test that says that there's some sort of an abnormality going on in your body, and then an imaging test that tells you where it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the test. So our product is not just a test. So we have put together a 50-state physician network that reviews your order, writes the prescription. The box goes to your home. The sample comes back to us.
Mm-hmm.
We run it in our laboratory, our high complexity laboratory here in Fayetteville. The results go back to the portal, to your own account.
Mm-hmm.
And then you schedule a consultation with one of our breast health specialists. These are nurse practitioners with at least 20 years of experience in the field.
Mm-hmm.
And they will help you with your plan of what you're going to do. They explain the results to you and tell you what you need to do next.
Mm-hmm. So for most people listening to something like this, especially for someone that's younger or someone that's kind of pushed this off, this is a non-invasive, relatively straightforward way to at least give you an idea of whether you should stop procrastinating.
Correct.
Go forward, and if so, how soon you should really make that happen. So if someone wanted to buy such tests and make that happen today, how would they do that? The website do they go to? Do they go to Nambia? How do they? So
the product is called Aria.
Aria, okay.
Auria. And the website is aria.care. C-A-R-E.
Aria.care. Okay, go there, and anyone here could just go purchase. It's going to come into their home, collect some tiers, send it back.
Yes, and until the end of the year, there's a 30% off.
Look at you.
Holiday 30.
Discount. That's a beautiful thing.
There's a discount code, Holiday 30.
Wow.
And it's FSA, HSA eligible. So if there's any funds left in there, you can use it there.
Okay, before the end of the year. That would be a great gift. Yeah, especially if you're thinking about a gift for someone. It'd be a great gift of healthcare in a kind of cool way to make that happen. So I got the website there. But what if someone wanted to have coffee with you, just to kind of hang out and talk more about being an inventor or healthcare in general? How would they contact you?
LinkedIn.
You're a LinkedIn guy. I like that. I like that. That's really, really cool. So if I look at what's next, real quickly, what is next for Aria?
So we have a whole pipeline of other tests in the making. We have at least 2 more versions of the breast cancer test. One for clinics and then a diagnostic one that can actually not send you to a mammogram, just say whether you have cancer or not.
Wow.
And we've been working with a company called Pattern Computer. It's a machine learning company that was founded by veterans of Microsoft. Full disclosure, I'm on their scientific advisory board.
Okay.
But we've been working with them on analyzing our data. And we have some targets there for an actual diagnostic. And then we have 5 other cancers that we're working on.
Okay.
Pancreatic, ovarian, colorectal, prostate, and pancreas. I said pancreas.
Right,
ovarian.
Right. Yeah.
Ovarian.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the commitment I'm looking for, is when the next one is ready, you'll come back in, we'll have another conversation. I'd love to learn more and see, really just kind of follow this journey that you're taking us in healthcare.
Our goal is to democratize cancer screening, bring it to the masses. And you can look at the naming of our products. Musical themes. They're not a difficult medical or drug name. Aria, melody. And because we see healthcare as a consumer product. It really should be a consumer product.
I love that. Listen, Omid, thank you for coming in. I love what you're doing. I can't wait to talk to you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick.
Thanks for listening to Push Go, a podcast highlighting the defining moments that impact how we live and work. It was great to have Omid on the show today. If you like what you heard, you can find more stories just like this on listen.plumshop.com. And hey, we wouldn't be mad if you left us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, we have new episodes dropping every Wednesday, and if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe. A quick PS, the weekly segment where I give you a brief update on something happening at Plum. Today's update comes from Plum provider Field Agent. Now, Field Agent recently acquired SimplyField, a mobile platform for retail operations, internal communications, and analytics. The SimplyField product is now available on our Plum marketplace, creating the first end-to-end retail operations experience for brands, wholesalers, retailers, and restaurants. Use the code PUSHGO, that's PUSHGO, at checkout for $100 off any project.